Did you know that some of the most well-read people are the furthest from true wisdom? You can quote the Buddha. You can explain emptiness in 5 different traditions. You can sound awakened, and yet still suffer the same restlessness, inner noise, and ache for something real. Have you ever found yourself talking about presence while being completely disconnected from the moment? Have you ever spoken beautifully about compassion and then judged someone the same evening? If that feels a little too familiar, this video is for you, because what most people call wisdom is often just well-dressed memory. What sounds profound may be borrowed, and what we're chasing may be the very thing keeping us from touching the truth. Today, we're not here to gather more knowledge. We're here to gently peel back the layers, layer by layer, of what Zen calls the conceptual mind, to arrive at something simpler, deeper, quieter. So are you ready to stop knowing and start seeing? Let's begin with the first layer, where most of us unknowingly get stuck. Level 1. Borrowed wisdom. When words replace seeing. You can spend 10 years studying enlightenment and still not know how to breathe fully in your own body. You can speak fluently about letting go while still gripping the opinions of others like a life raft. Sounds familiar? Let's talk about it. The comfortable trap of knowing too much. There's a strange illusion in the spiritual world. The more we can explain, the more we think we've arrived. But Zen warns us that concepts are not reality. They're like chopsticks, useful for picking up food, but never to be eaten themselves. This first layer of wisdom is what I call second-hand seeing. You've probably been here. I've certainly been here. You read a great book, hear a profound quote, feel moved, and then what do? We repeat it, post it, teach it. But here's the twist. You haven't seen it yet. You're describing a sunrise you've never actually woken up for. I once gave a talk at a retreat center full of Zen quotes, mindfulness techniques, and poetic language. People clapped, some cried. But that night, alone in silence, I felt hollow. Because deep inside, I knew I hadn't lived a single word I just said. It was humbling, and honestly, it was also a little embarrassing. Not because I lied, but because I mistook information for transformation. Why do we cling to borrowed knowledge? Because it's safe, predictable, admired. Our minds are wired to seek coherence and validation, especially when we're unsure of our truth. There's also something deeper, something tender. Many of us grew up being rewarded for knowing the right answer, not for pausing to ask the right questions. So we learn to perform wisdom, not embody it, to speak of impermanence but fear losing status, to praise non-attachment while still checking the likes on our spiritual post. See the irony? Here's something most people don't realize. When you operate from borrowed insight, your energy vibrates with insecurity, and like attracts like. So instead of drawing on real teachers or experiences that challenge you, you attract people who are also stuck in performance. You start orbiting in circles of seeming, not seeing. I've been in those circles. We all sound enlightened, but deep down, we're scared to admit we've never felt what we so confidently explain. Describing the ocean from a textbook doesn't make you wet. You can memorize every current, every wave formation, every fish species. But until you dive in, you haven't known water. You've only known about water. Honestly, I think the universe has a great sense of humor. The moment you think, I've got it, it hands you a situation where all your quotes fall flat, and all that remains is your raw, awkward self. It's like the spiritual version of slipping on a banana peel while holding a scroll of enlightened proverbs. Humbling? Yes. Liberating? Even more. Here's the danger of staying too long in this borrowed layer. You risk becoming addicted to the image of being wise while your life quietly dries up. You miss the intimacy of real seeing, real presence, real aliveness. And worst of all, you stop growing, because growth can't happen when everything is already known. If you're here stuck in borrowed wisdom, that's okay. We all start here. But don't mistake it for the destination. Wisdom doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives in silence, in falling apart, in not knowing, and still showing up fully. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what belief do I often repeat that doesn't feel fully mine? Not to judge it, but to meet it, to make space for something more honest to arise. Because the moment you stop repeating and start doubting, something powerful begins to shift. Doubt in Zen is not failure. It's the fire that burns away illusion. And in our next part, we'll explore exactly that. The sacred rebellion that begins when you dare to question your most cherished truths. Level 2, Reflective Wisdom. The inner rebellion. What if the things you've always believed about love, life, and even yourself were not wrong, but simply inherited? What if your suffering doesn't come from what you lack, but from what you've never questioned? Now that's a dangerous kind of truth, isn't it? We're taught that doubt is weakness, that if you're unsure, you're unstable. But in Zen, doubt is not the enemy of wisdom. It is the doorway to it. This is the level where you stop asking, what's right to believe, and begin to ask, who is the one believing? It's uncomfortable, but it's real. And once this layer begins to peel, there's no going back to safe answers anymore. Many of us carry around beliefs like family heirlooms. We've never truly chosen them. We just never questioned them. From how love should feel, to what success looks like, to how we define kindness. It's amazing how much of our life is lived on autopilot, not out of alignment, but out of inherited conditioning. The scary part? Much of what we call truth is just the path of least resistance for the nervous system. We believe what soothes us, not always what frees us. At this stage, you begin to realize something hard to admit. You haven't been loyal to the truth, you've been loyal to comfort, and that's okay. For a while, safety feels like peace, but eventually, peace asks for something else. It asks for honesty. And honesty at this level often tastes like confusion. You feel lost, not because you are, but because you've stopped pretending to be found. I remember sitting at a silent retreat, trying to meditate. But my mind was loud, not with thoughts, but with fear. Not of the silence, but of what might rise if I truly let go. I realized I wasn't afraid of being wrong. I was afraid of not having anything left to believe in if I stopped repeating what I was taught. That moment didn't bring clarity, it brought collapse. But from that collapse came the beginning of something, me. This level of wisdom feels like peeling off old wallpaper. At first you just scratch a corner, harmless. But soon the whole wall begins to show cracks. Not because you broke it, but because what's underneath was always waiting to be seen. The wall isn't broken, it's just yours. Honestly, this phase is messy. You'll question everything, then eat a snack and forget you were in a spiritual crisis. You'll write 10 pages of journaling, only to realize you just circled your ego again. But that's okay. As one of my teachers once said, if you're not a little confused, you're not waking up. Here's the truth. Most people avoid this layer. It's too raw, too inconvenient, too destabilizing. But here's the risk. If you skip it, your entire spiritual life becomes performance. You build a beautiful house on borrowed ground, and one storm, One death, one heartbreak, one big life shake, and the whole thing crumbles. You can't build truth on unexamined belief. You have to tear it open, gently, but bravely. This stage is not glamorous. You won't get Instagram quotes out of it, but you will get something better. Your voice, not the one trained to impress, the one that whispers in the dark and asks, "Are we still pretending?" And if you can say, "No, not anymore," then wisdom has begun. Today, take a pen and write down one truth I've always carried that I'm no longer sure about. Not to erase it, but to sit beside it, breathe with it. Maybe for the first time ask, "Is this mine?" Because once you've stripped away the borrowed and faced the doubt, what's left must be lived, not spoken. And in the next part, we'll explore what happens when wisdom moves out of your mouth and into your movement, into how you listen. How do you walk? How do you cook dinner with presence? Let's walk into that now. Level 3, Embodied Wisdom. When living replaces talking. I've met monks who spoke like poets and left no impression. And I've met old farmers who barely said a word and changed the way I walk through life. Why is it that some of the deepest truths not heard, but felt? The quiet revolution of presence. At this level, something subtle shifts. You stop needing to sound wise. You no longer reach for quotes. You no longer search for language that lands. You just live, aligned, honest, present. And strangely, people begin to feel safer around you. Not because you have the answers, but because you've stopped performing. In Zen, this is where the teaching leaves the tongue and enters the hand. Chopping wood, carrying water, listening fully, chewing slowly. Nothing's dramatic, but everything is alive. Earlier on the path, words were thrilling. You were moved by clever phrasing, paradox, and metaphors that bent the mind. But here, language starts to feel insufficient, not because there's nothing left to say, but because you realize the real teaching isn't in what's said, it's in how one lives. You become aware of something subtle. People may hear what you say, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. You don't need to convince anyone anymore. You stop walking into rooms trying to be the light. You just enter quietly and let your presence speak for itself. And here's the strange part. That kind of presence speaks louder than any mantra ever could. There's a healing that happens in the absence of performance. There's wisdom in your walk, compassion in your stillness, integrity in your laugh. Years ago, I met a woman who had lost everything: her child, her marriage, her business. We were on retreat together. She barely spoke, but sitting beside her felt like being held in the palm of a steady hand. She wasn't wise in the way we usually define it. She didn't give advice. She didn't recite scriptures. She just was. And her beingness made everything in me settle. Like a still pond, no ripples, just space. That day, I realized something I've never forgotten. Some people heal you by simply not needing to be anything. This kind of wisdom is like a cup of tea left to steep without rushing. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need sugar or garnish or glass teapots. It just warms your hands and reminds you you're alive. Now let's be real. Trying to embody presence can become its weirdest performance. I've seen people walk slowly just to appear mindful and then trip on their mala beads. Been there, done that. Real embodiment isn't an act. It's a falling away from acting. It's forgetting yourself in the best way possible. If you stay stuck in the head, overthinking, over-explaining, over-spiritualizing, you'll miss the very life you're trying to wake up for. Embodiment is the shift from thinking presence to being it. And that's where healing becomes contagious. It's not that you radiate peace to impress others. It's that your peace stops disturbing others. And that is rare. In a world obsessed with performance, yes, even in spiritual spaces, a truly embodied person is a revolution. You don't need to be impressive. You need to be real. You don't need to be loud. You need to be here. So instead of chasing the next insight, maybe the invitation is this. Can you walk across the room and make the floor feel respected beneath your feet? Pick one ordinary thing today, eating, brushing, walking. Do it like it matters. Do it like it's the only moment that exists, because it is. But here's the trap. Even this level of quiet wisdom can become another identity, another form of ego wearing humble robes. So what happens when even the desire to be present dissolves? When there's no more you trying to be wise or kind or anything at all? In our next step, we'll explore that mystery. Level 4. Selfless Wisdom. The disappearance of the seeker. Have you ever noticed, once you stop trying to prove yourself, people stop arguing with you? You're not here to be someone wise. You're here to disappear and finally see what's always been there. There's a subtle, beautiful turning point on the path. It's not flashy. There are no fireworks, no sense of arrival, just a soft dissolving, like fog lifting after a long night. Here, wisdom no longer comes from you. It moves through you, not as something you own, but as something you no longer block. You don't feel the need to interrupt. You don't insert spiritual insights into casual conversations. You don't lace everything with deeper meaning. You're just there, aware, empty, available. And ironically, that's when people start listening. Early in the journey, we crave being seen as insightful. We drop profound quotes. We speak softly so we sound peaceful. We try to be kind, but secretly still want credit for it. Let's be honest, we've all been there. Even our humility is sometimes just ego in disguise. Look how humble I am, did you notice? But at this level, the game ends. You no longer care if you're respected or invisible, because you've stopped needing the role of the one who knows. That role has burned off in the fire of presence. When you let go of needing to be right, something profound happens. Conversations get quieter. Arguments lose their pull. You stop walking into rooms hoping to impact anyone. Instead, you walk in curious about the space itself. You stop offering advice unless asked, because you finally trust that silence often says more than speech. The applause you once chased? Gone. And strangely, you don't miss it. I was once pulled into a heated discussion, two friends debating spirituality, philosophy, ego, truth, the usual buffet. They looked at me, expecting a response. I smiled. I didn't speak, not because I lacked an opinion, but because deep down I knew nothing I added would be true enough. Everything I could say would still be too much. Afterward, one of them came to me and said, "That's silence. You were the only one who made sense." That's when I knew, sometimes the greatest offering is non-interference. At this stage, you become like a mirror. You reflect what's in front of you with precision, but without attachment. The mirror doesn't judge. It doesn't highlight itself. It simply is. Clear, clean, still. And ironically, its stillness becomes the very thing others are drawn to. Not to be impressed, but to feel safe enough to see themselves. Now, don't get me wrong. Just when you think the ego is gone, it will whisper, "Wow, look at you, so egoless. Maybe write a book about it." That's when you laugh, because you realize even the desire to disappear can become another costume. So you smile, and drop that too. Welcome to the most peaceful emptiness you'll ever meet. Here's what most seekers never realize. The more you try to become wise, the further you get from wisdom. Why? Because real wisdom is not a possession, it's a space. And when you stop trying to hold it, it starts flowing through you. This is why the most powerful teachers are often the least interested in teaching, because life itself has become the transmission. I used to think my insight had to be heard. Now I realize most of the time, it's enough that I hear it. I don't need to pass it on like a gift. I just need to live it so deeply that it radiates wordlessly. There's a deep freedom in no longer being the main character in every room. You're not the story. You're the awareness that holds the story. Today, try this. In one conversation, just one, resist the urge to insert yourself. Let others speak. Don't prepare your reply. Just listen, not as a wise person, just as presence. Now here's the paradox. Even this emptiness, this stillness, this selfless presence can still be named, still be felt. But what if there's a level where nothing is left to be named? No teacher, no seeker, no insight, no need to understand. What if wisdom no longer has a voice, only a presence so subtle, it speaks without form? That's where we're going next. Level 5. Wordless Wisdom. When silence becomes light. Have you ever met someone who didn't say much, yet somehow just being around them made your mind go still? They weren't impressive, they weren't loud, but their silence was louder than any teaching. Let's talk about that kind of presence. The wisdom that no longer needs a name. At this level, even the knower dissolves. There's no more I understand or I have learned. There's only the unfolding, only suchness, a word Zen uses to describe the moment when life is just life. No filter, no handler, no storyteller narrating over it. It's like when you stop thinking the sunset is beautiful, because there's no more separation between you and it. You are not observing peace, you are peace unobserved. And here's the strange part. You're more awake than ever, but you no longer need to know that you are. In the West, we often equate silence with passivity, as if silence means you're checked out or afraid or disengaged. But the silence here is different. It's not emptiness from lack. It's fullness without weight. You're still washing dishes, still having conversations, but there's no inner commentator left to approve or critique. There's no you managing the moment. Life simply flows through without resistance. That's not passivity, that's intimacy. Years ago, I sat next to an old monk during a retreat. He didn't look at me, didn't speak to me, didn't try to transmit wisdom in any way. But in his presence, my mind went silent, not out of effort, not because I forced concentration. It was like my whole nervous system suddenly remembered what peace felt like. And the funny thing, he probably had no idea the impact he made. Because when you've reached this level, you don't try to change anyone. You've stopped believing that's your job. This stage of wisdom is like sunlight. It doesn't aim, it doesn't filter, it doesn't choose what to bless or ignore. It just shines. It warms the saint and the sinner equally. It falls on garbage and gardens without preference. You too become like that. You stop choosing what moments are worthy of presence. You're just present, without effort, without an agenda. Now here's the paradox. The moment you try to reach this stage, you've missed it, because the one trying to reach it is the very self that must dissolve. You can't grasp wordless wisdom. You can only fall into it when you're not looking, and often it comes in the most unexpected places. In the silence between thoughts, in the space between reactions, In the pause where you don't correct someone, even though they're wrong, and yes, I know it's hard. Let's be honest. Trying to act like you've reached this stage can get weird. You force long pauses in conversations. You stare at people trying to radiate calm. You nod slowly like some kind of human lava lamp. It's okay. We've all done it. The truth is, real stillness can't be mimicked because it's not a behavior. It's what's left when behaviors fall away. Imagine this. You wake up and there's no story, just sunlight on your skin, a breath in your chest, no urge to optimize the morning. You eat breakfast not while checking emails or mentally planning, but just eating. The toast is crunchy, the tea is warm, the air is cool, and that's enough. You stop needing the moment to prove anything. This isn't escapism, it's arrival. Most people spend their whole lives trying to find meaning. But what if meaning arrives the moment we stop trying to manufacture it? People often ask, but don't you ever need to speak the truth? Of course, but here's the shift. You no longer speak to control outcomes. You speak when it's natural, like a breeze passing through an open window. There's no ego left to decorate the moment. And paradoxically, that's when your words carry the most weight, because they come from no one. Sometime today, just once. Let a moment unfold, without fixing it, without labeling it, without needing to share it. Let the moment be, and let yourself disappear into it. Even if it's just 10 seconds, even if it's just brushing your teeth, that stillness is sacred. You've just traveled through 5 layers of human wisdom, not as abstract concepts, but as mirrors. From quoting teachers, to questioning everything, to slowly letting truth settle in your body, to let even the seeker dissolve, to simply sit in silence where life lives itself. Maybe now, the question is no longer, what do I know? But from where am I living? Because true wisdom isn't about what you can remember. It's about what remains when there's nothing left to prove. You don't need to hold on to this video. You only need to return to quiet, to stillness, to the simplicity already living inside you. Today, try this. Speak a little less. Feel a little more. Let your gestures, your breath, your pauses carry the message your mouth no longer needs to say. And if this touched something in you, share it with someone who's also tired of pretending. Comment below with these words, I choose presence over performance. And if you're walking a path that no longer fits into words, subscribe. Let's keep unlearning together.